You're listening to A Catholic's Perspective with the Religious Hippie. That's me, the podcast all about being a young Catholic surviving in a secular world. Around here, we pray first, pop off second. Whether you're struggling, thriving, or somewhere in between, this podcast is for you. So grab an iced coffee and let's chat. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the pod. Honestly, it's been a while, and I was really itching to get back into things with you guys because I miss you guys and I miss doing all this stuff. But I also wasn't completely sure where to start because I feel like there are so many things that have happened and so many more things that are happening, even though I can't just talk about those things just yet. But for now, I'm just basically trying to find a new normal. And I think now I'm kind of settling into a new normal a little bit better. For those who don't know, my father died of cancer back in November. That was a battle that we had really been fighting for almost 2 years, and it took a toll on everyone, really, really hard. And especially my dad, it was truly devastating. And there were just months and months of doctor's appointments, trying to get answers, doing everything we could, just taking the traditional route to the holistic approach. We worked with multiple different doctors, just hoping that there would be something, that could turn everything around and that could get my dad on the mend. But each month he got worse, and he really did suffer a lot. And it was very, very difficult to kind of see that over the course of almost 2 years. And he did receive all the sacraments and the apostolic blessing. For those who don't know what the apostolic blessing is, it's very, very important because it forgives all temporal punishment. But yeah, I've dealt with loss and grief from a pretty young age, but nobody ever really prepares you for losing your dad, especially when you're a daddy's girl. We were completely inseparable, always doing something together, going to Menards for a new project that he was working on, or just helping him with his koi pond. We just did a lot together. So now I'm trying to figure out what life looks like without him. And I do have an amazing husband. He's my rock, and he's been so incredibly helpful through all of this, but it's hard. I will say my brother, he's the best. John is amazing. He always likes to drop these little wisdom bombs on me every now and then when he calls me. But yeah, he called me the day my dad died, and he said, live a life he would want you to live, and a life that he would be proud of you living. So that's basically what I'm trying to do. And I do hope I'm making him proud. But that's basically been my reality for almost 2 years, just feeling like there's this anvil hanging over me, just waiting to drop, just living in survival mode, fight or flight constantly. Is something going to happen? What if I'm not there? But I was there. So was Max, my mom, and my sister, and he went peacefully, and he had all the sacraments, and that just gives me a lot of peace. So now I guess it's just kind of just figuring everything else out one day at a time. It's definitely different, and the holidays were different, and everything's just different. But I have a lot of hope, and I'm just kind of working through the loss every day. It's hard because people don't really tell you that you don't. I mean, it depends on your specific situation. But for me, I feel like I'm actually handling it fairly well, but it's the days where my dad would usually be around, or when something big happens and I can't call him and tell him. Like, that's really where the struggle is, I guess I would say. So yeah, just kind of working through that. And I do appreciate your guys' prayers and everything. You guys were monumental in all of this. And I was actually doing the St. Peregrine Novena while I was there. And he passed away the 9th day of that novena. So, I just pray for his soul, and I just hope that I make him proud every day, and that's what I try to do. But yeah, so that's the update. Just wanted to let you guys know what kind of happened there, because I know a lot of you guys have been so sweet. You guys have been asking and just, trying to, keep up with me and everything. So I do really, really appreciate that. You guys are the best. But yeah, we're going to get into this podcast topic. I kind of went back and forth on a bunch of different topics, but I settled on discussing how to be patient with God's timing, but also not sitting around and doing nothing. I don't really know how I'm going to title this podcast yet, so that's what I have right now. I apologize, it's kind of long-winded, but I think this topic is important to me because it can apply to literally anything. It's so diverse. You can apply it to dating, school, friendships, vocations, self-growth, prayer life, etc. And since it does tend to be a pretty common question I get, I just figured that I would make it into an entire podcast episode for you guys. Because let's be honest, we all kind of struggle with this. And it seems to me that a lot of people think that quote unquote waiting on God is this like passive thing, you know, like you just wait around and God will do the rest, no need for you to get involved. But that is not the right way to look at it. I think a lot of people look at it that way and it's like, no, sweetie, don't do that. That's not it. I like using the example of a guest coming over. So let's say you're having a friend stay with you for the weekend. You wouldn't just be sitting on your couch scrolling through reels until they got there. You would be preparing for them, you know, getting the guest room ready, prepping meals, figuring out plans and activities. So that's kind of how we have to look at it when we're waiting on God. We wait on him, you know, of course, because providence and his perfect timing, but we're also actively preparing for the things that we're waiting for. So I'll give another example. Let's say that you want to get married, but you have a pornography addiction. You have credit card debt and you have no job or path forward. God is not going to give you a spouse in those conditions. You have to work on yourself. You have to work on your spiritual life, crack down on your debt, start getting professional help for any and all addictions or disorders you might have, like alcohol, porn, masturbation, eating disorders, drugs, nicotine, etc. You don't have to be perfect. Okay, I want to make that clear. But you do need to strive for perfection. You need to really search internally and be able to do self-reflection. I think self-reflection is the number one thing I struggled with back when I was coming into my faith. I didn't know how to dig deep. I didn't know how to look for different wounds. I didn't know how to recognize any of that stuff. But when I started reflecting and doing nightly examinations of conscience and all of that, it really helped. So dig deep, you know, what are some wounds that you are struggling with that could impact your future spouse or your future in general? And don't think like, oh, well, when I do XYZ, I won't struggle with this anymore. Oh, when I get married, I won't struggle with porn anymore. Oh, when I get into my favorite college, I'll stop vaping. That is the biggest lie, okay? Marriage doesn't get rid of vices, it magnifies them. And you are just going to constantly be putting things off because that's just how we are. So whatever issue you are struggling with right now, just prepare to have those wounds be touched in marriage, or honestly just throughout life in general. But this is why it is so important to get good at self-reflection. That way you can recognize these faults in yourself and you can be honest and transparent with your spouse if something like this comes up again. You know what I mean? So definitely figure out what's wrong with yourself and start working on that. I highly suggest talking to a priest, a Catholic therapist, or just in general finding a mentor, ideally of the same sex that you are. They can just really help put things into perspective and just offer that support that you will need, because I think that's something else that we don't talk about enough is people will talk about, oh, well, yeah, do X, Y, and Z and make sure that you're doing this, this, and that, but they don't actually realize that young people need support. Old people need support too. What am I talking about? Everybody needs support. But then it's like they'll tell people like, oh, do this, but then they won't offer resources. So I'm offering resources below. It's not sponsored or anything like that, but I do love these two resources specifically for mentorships and a Catholic therapist. I think they're the best of the best. And again, not sponsored. I mean, even if it was sponsored, I would genuinely think that, but not sponsored. So yeah, there's that. So I would highly suggest taking advantage of that and just actually prioritizing getting a good support group or support friend or just somebody who you can trust. You know, that's really, really important. I also found that actually a lot of people, they'll tell me that their biggest struggle is trusting God's timing. It's not necessarily waiting. It's more like trusting that his timing is actually perfect and that he has a plan for them. And I get that. I 100% relate. I understand what it's like to be afraid of God's plan because you really only see it in hindsight. You only see his plan after the fact. And, it's hard because you're afraid of what God's plan is for you compared to what you think his plan should be for you. And, maybe it's a struggle because maybe you have trust issues in general and this is just another little wound that's tacked on top. But I don't know. I think it's something that we really need to ponder and we need to pray about personally, like bring it to prayer, talk to God about it because he's there to listen. He understands. He knows what's happening. But maybe, you're a college student who's trying to get into college and you're afraid that the college you want so badly to go into won't accept you. Maybe they do accept you. Amazing. Thank God. But what if they don't? Will you still see God's hand in that outcome? Will you still thank him? Because he has something much better figured out for you, but can you see it? Or do we throw a tantrum? Why, God, why? You let me down. This is all I ever wanted. Now, I'm not saying that you can't be upset, okay? Human emotions, that's totally just a part of being human. You can be upset about things. The issue is that many people become bitter, angry, or they just start blaming God for everything that goes wrong in their life. But his plans for us are so much greater than anything we could ever imagine. And just like a good parent, he doesn't give us everything we ask for, especially when he knows it could harm us physically or spiritually. I mean, think of a little kid who's going to touch a hot stove. His mom knows that that stove is hot because of experience and whatever, but little Timmy doesn't know that that stove is hot. And so sometimes a parent has to let their child get burned in order to teach them a lesson, but they do try to prevent it. However, we do have free will and we can still try and force our way, and then the outcome is just not the best, if that makes sense. Like, you get burned. It's not great. So no, God is not holding out on you. He's not punishing you when he closes the door to something that you thought you wanted. He is looking out for you and is planning something bigger, something you might not have ever thought of before. And it's really important to stay grounded and faithful. Pour your heart out to God. He already knows, okay? He does, but I just find that it helps me mentally to just kind of dish it all out. But don't let all of your prayer be complaints and worries. I'm going to repeat that. Don't let all of your prayer be complaints and worries. When was the last time you told God you loved him? When was the last time you thanked him for things that he has given you? I think gratitude is something we all lack. I lack it. I struggle with it as well. And so gratitude can really go a long way. It'll change your mindset, and overall, we just all need to really work on it. Oh, something else. I don't have a script for this, so forgive me if I say something. I'm kind of going off the cuff here. Not the best, but if I don't, just forgive me if I say something out of turn. But I do think it's important for people to be committed to something, and I am going to specifically speak to the men here. Guys, we don't need more single men doing podcasts and hanging out with their online yes men dude bros. Literally stop, okay? We don't need any more of that. We need men who are committed to something, mainly a vocation. Ideally, we need priests, and very few men are actively pursuing and seeking out their vocation as a priest. It doesn't mean you become one, okay? I want to be clear about that. But a lot of men refuse to even try, or they use the excuse of being unworthy to get out of it. Get over it. Try. Commit to something. A lot of guys have commitment issues. And I'll be honest, I was raised as the son my dad never had. I loved it. But when I'm the most masculine person in a room, we have a problem. Okay, we have a major problem. And I love you guys. I love the men. Ladies, we have a lot of issues as well, and I'll cover that in a different podcast. But when men don't commit to anything and live in a bubble where other guys are just constantly telling them they're right and they're never challenged or anything because all their friends are yes men, that is a problem. Okay, that is a huge problem. We need men and women who are okay not being known, who are fine not becoming famous or being the best at something. We need humility more than anything else. And this goes for me. I'm not sitting on a high horse telling you guys exactly what to do. I'm also striving for this. I'm trying, okay? And I fall short too, but that doesn't mean, I can't just call it out when I see it. Call me a hypocrite all you want, but I'm right deep down. So focus your time and energy on something that will actually help you grow as a person. Not everyone needs a podcast, okay? I don't even know if I'll be continuing this podcast in the future. Not every thought you have needs to be shared online. If your friends only ever agree with you and they never challenge you, that's a huge red flag. Huge red flag. My friends have always taught me so much. And when I'm wrong or I'm too brash or I made a mistake, they will tell me and they get me back on track. I know they love me. I know they want what's best for me. So I actually take to heart what they say if I've done something wrong. That's just something that's really been bothering me. It's been bothering me for months now, so sorry about that tangent, but had to get that off my chest. But before we go further, I want to talk about the sponsor of today's podcast, Gloria Patri. Yep, I am still obsessed with them and I am still drinking their coffee, and you should try them too. Or if you have a coffee lover in your family, try the Trinity Bundle. You can get 10% off with my code HIPPIE10, that's HIPPIE 10 at gloriapatri.com. Let's sip together and let me know what you think. So getting back on track, I guess basically what I'm trying to say in this podcast is that God will water us, but we need to plant the seed first. If we keep the seed out of the soil because we're afraid of hardship, rejection, darkness, etc., we'll never actually grow. God doesn't just appear out of nowhere and give you some crazy revelation through a lightning bolt, though. You know what? Weirder things have happened. It can happen, but he often speaks through our natural desires and circumstances, and you'll see it in hindsight. You sometimes really don't know until after the fact, And Max and I discuss this all the time because truly the last 4 years have been complete divine providence. We have no idea what we've been doing, and it's been a struggle bus, but every single time we look back and we're like, God really knew what he was doing. Why are we constantly just freaking out about stuff? And so now we're actually really, really good about it because we're like, this is going to work out. We need to do things still to make sure that it works out. But at the end of the day, it's in God's hands. And that's honestly the most relieving thing I think I've ever felt. So yeah, you guys really have to practice it. It's hard, don't get me wrong. But it really does offer a lot of relief in your life when you get older. Not when you get older, just in general, like as life goes on. This is why I need a script, because sometimes I just say stuff. That's basically what I mean though. But yeah, the last 4 years has definitely been completely in God's hands, and I hope it stays that way because God is great. He really is. But you do have to take care of a lot of things like yourself. Are you taking care of yourself? Are you working out? Are you eating right? Are you going to therapy if needed? Do you have a solid relationship with God? Are you receiving the sacraments? Are you taking care of your finances? Are you working on any debt you have? Are you living below your means? Are you learning about taxes and mortgages and all of that stuff? And, another important one are social skills. Are you working on your social skills? Are you going out regularly with friends, going to events, talking to people, getting out of your comfort zone? These are just a few things that I ask myself and I ask others. Sometimes it's so easy to overlook our own faults that we don't realize we're the ones holding ourselves back. So you really have to be conscious of those things and reflect. Again, it all comes back to interior reflection. So yeah, that's basically all I have to say about that. But now I'm going to be answering some questions that I've gotten over the years that I think fit with this topic. So hunker down. This is going to get interesting. Grab yourself a cup of Gloria Patri espresso because, we got 4 questions here and I think they're really important, but not everyone's going to like my answers. So we'll see. All right. Number 1, is there such thing as the one, as in like a soulmate? And to that, I have to say, not quite. This kind of thinking is called fatalism, and I do believe it's actually very, very dangerous to hold this belief because then it implies that we aren't free to choose our spouse. Like we don't have free will and it's that's just completely false. God does have his providence, divine providence and plans and whatnot, but he invites us to participate in it. He doesn't force us to. We still have to choose someone to marry, someone to build the domestic church with. We're not stuffed into a box. We don't have to wait for this specific person. And yeah, you know what? This is a sad part. I've actually seen a lot of women use this excuse as to why they divorced their husbands. Like, oh, the flame went out and I just don't feel like I have a connection with my husband anymore. And then they just decide that because of that, it means that their husband wasn't their soulmate. And then they divorce him and they go looking for their quote unquote real soulmate. It's so stupid if you ask me, but I have seen that actually more times than I'd like to admit. And so it's just dangerous, okay? If the flame went out in your marriage, it's a mutual thing. I mean, there's obviously extensive cases where there's like abuse and whatnot. Obviously, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the mundane, the usual stuff. You just feel like roommates. You guys just kind of fall into a lull and things aren't special anymore, okay? That's up to both of you to do. You guys have to both do that, like make the marriage feel special, and you need to communicate about that. And this is not about to be a marriage advice podcast, but point is, it's just really, really annoying. So no, there is really no such thing as the one in sense of like, oh, there's this only one specific person that I have to hold out for because they are the one I'm meant to be with. But God does have somebody in mind with you, but that doesn't mean, you're going to marry your soulmate. You could be very happy with almost anyone in marriage, right? You could be happy with multiple different people, and different marriages would teach you different things. But at the end of the day, there's no like right answer. Does that make sense? There's not like one soulmate that it's like this person is yours until you're married. When you're on the altar, then yeah, okay, they're yours. But until then, no. Okay, number 2. I'm dating someone I really like, but I still have a nagging feeling about the priesthood or religious life. Or religious life, like brotherhood? I don't know. Okay, anyways. Am I supposed to ignore it until that goes away, or am I supposed to break up with her and check it out? This one's always a tricky question because you cannot discern two vocations at the same time. Okay, so if the tug towards religious life is persistent, you do have to give God a fair chance to call you in that direction. St. Ignatius of Loyola suggests that God often moves us through desolations and consolations. So if the thought of religious life brings a deep, quiet peace, even if it's scary, okay, because it can be scary, that would be a sign to visit a seminary or a convent. I'm speaking to women and men here. So, I would just say if there's that tug, follow it. Also, because I need to say this, after the amount of people I've seen that thinks this is okay, it is not. Do not keep the person you are dating on a string. I can't believe I even have to say that. Do not give them hope that you'll come out of discerning religious life and want to get married to them. That is so cruel, okay? Cut them loose fully. If they say, I'll wait for you, tell them no, don't wait for me. It isn't fair to them to wait around for something that may never happen. And it isn't fair to you to basically still have one foot in the dating pool while also discerning religious life. Sorry. Not fair to God at the end of the day. I mean, it's not fair to you either because you can't discern properly like that, but it's not fair to God, So you have to cut it clean and focus on one vocation at a time. If you discern out of, the religious life, great. Maybe that person is still single and you guys can try again, maybe not, and that's okay too. But you guys cannot be stringing each other along like that. The amount of emails that I get where it's like, my boyfriend's discerning the priesthood, but he said that I should wait for him in case it doesn't work out. And I was just like, girl, get you a new boy. Oh, that is boy behavior. That is not man behavior. So don't do that, okay? Just don't. That's cruel. Moving on. I'm in my 30s. I'm not married and I don't feel called to a nunnery. Am I just stuck, or is there a specific calling for me? Am I supposed to be a permanent single? So first thing I want to say, sadly, is that there are many content creators and authors and just other people out there who act like being single is like you being in some sort of limbo. Like your life doesn't begin until you've chosen a vocation like marriage or religious life or consecrated single life. And I hate that because it makes being single this whole like anxious waiting period that people cannot wait to break free from, instead of actually appreciating the singlehood time of, discovery and growth and just learning things about yourself. That just makes me really sad when people treat singleness as though it's like this limbo, and it just causes a lot of anxiety, and I think it's completely unnecessary. Anyways, but St. John Paul II, he explained in Vita Consecrata, oh my gosh, I cannot read for the life of me, that those who live celibately for the kingdom are a sign of the world to come. So in heaven, there's no marriage. So by choosing to remain single for God, you are living like a preview of heaven right now. So basically, what does that look like? Well, if you are a consecrated virgin, I think this is probably the oldest image of the church, in my opinion. Like, you are betrothed to Christ, but live in the world. You keep your job and you support yourself and stuff like that. But then there's another option, like secular institutes. So you take vows of poverty and chastity and obedience, but you live like a quote unquote normal life in the world. So you're like a teacher, a lawyer, or whatever, but you're acting as like leaven in society, if that makes sense. When someone is called to this kind of life, they feel like there's a fullness or a quiet pull to this kind of life. And I would say it's not like a lack of desire for marriage. A lot of these people still desire marriage, but there's a stronger, more competing desire to belong exclusively to Christ. If the perfect man, walked in the room tomorrow, would you feel a sense of relief, or would you feel a sense of loss and discomfort? Sometimes we don't actually know until we're in these situations, but I do have a friend and she so strongly desires a husband and family. It's all she ever talks about, and I love that about her. I have another friend, however, and she only talked about marriage here and there. She talked about it very lovingly. She thought it was wonderful, and she wouldn't mind being a mother one day, but it never seemed to be something she was completely interested in. And now she's a consecrated single virgin. So it really does take discernment. At the end of the day, God will put you where you need to be, and you can trust that. I think that's the best thing about God is, again, trusting in him and his divine providence. Okay, moving on. I want to be a better person so I can finally find a spouse. Is it selfish to go to the gym, read self-help, and work on my personality just to be more marketable? Well, when you put it like that, yes, that is kind of a problem, because that seems very ego-driven, very pride-driven, almost like there's a wound there, where when you were younger, you were taught that you had to do things in order to earn love. Like, if I do this, then I'll be loved. So if that is the case, I would definitely suggest working on that, because I think we can try and, do all the self-help we can, but until we do internal reflection and figure out where these wounds are coming from, we won't actually do it for the right reasons. Because there's nothing inherently wrong about going to the gym, reading self-help books, working on your personality. That's all good things. But the problem is when it becomes a vice, when it becomes a band-aid for something and you don't actually get to the root of that issue. So it really depends on why. Are you building a monument to yourself, or are you building a temple of the Holy Spirit? This is where intention really does play its part. The Catholic self-improvement side of things is actually called the purgative way. And it's just like the process of weeding out vices, gluttony, sloth, pride, etc., so that the graces can flow through you. And it's a very, very good thing to do. So I would add that into your self-help. You should also strive for excellence because you represent Christ to the world. So working on your fitness, your social skills, and your mental health, that is important because it makes you more capable of serving others. But are you using it for that, or are you feeding your own ego and pride? So study your temperament. I think that can be really, really helpful. Are you a sanguine, choleric, melancholic, or phlegmatic? You need to, for lack of a better word, tame your natural weaknesses. So if you are choleric, you are angry and more driven, you need to work on meekness. If you are phlegmatic, you are passive and you're kind of lazy in some ways, then you need to work on fortitude, and then just so on. So definitely look into the temperaments. There's 4 temperaments, and figure out which one you are. I am a sanguine phlegmatic, but just keep in check why you're doing these things. Make sure that they're actually helping you grow in virtue and just overall as a well-rounded human being. Otherwise, honestly, there's nothing really wrong with it, but intention does play a huge part. So yeah, wow, okay, this podcast was a lot more spicy than I was originally intending it to be. Some hot button topics and stuff, but I feel like it needed to be stated, and I'm just really glad you guys could hang out with me. And if you could do me a huge favor, please sub, share, and give this podcast a 5-star rating if you enjoyed it. Y'all are the best. And thanks so much for tuning in, and yeah, I'll talk to you guys in the next podcast. Bye. This podcast is produced by Amber Rose and is distributed by Metacortex Publishing. This podcast is copyright by The Religious Hippie. Any previously trademarked or copywritten content is used by permission. Information and opinions in this podcast should not be construed as medical advice. Be sure to visit the official website of The Religious Hippie at thereligioushippie.com or find me on social media for other unique content. Thank you.